It was an ordinary Thursday evening when my world came crashing down. The sun had set, casting an amber glow across the horizon, and the air felt thick with the anticipation of another peaceful night at home. After a long day at work, I was eager to get home, kick off my shoes, and relax. It had been a long, stressful week, and all I wanted was to unwind in the comfort of my own space. As I pulled into the driveway of our home, something felt off. The car parked in the driveway was familiar. It was his, my husband's, yet there was something different. A sleek black sedan, unfamiliar and out of place, was parked in front of our house. A wave of unease washed over me, but I tried to shake it off. Maybe it was a neighbor's car, or perhaps a delivery service. I was tired, overthinking, or so I convinced myself. I made my way to the door, but even before I reached the handle, I could hear faint laughter. The sound wasn't loud or obnoxious, but it was there. Genuine, intimate laughter. My heart began to race. Why was he laughing with someone else? Who was here? Maybe a coworker, a friend from his childhood. It wasn't unusual for him to have guests, but something about the laughter felt too intimate, too close. I paused at the door, trying to tell myself it was nothing. I had been paranoid before. Maybe I was just tired. Deep down, a pit was forming in my stomach, a gnawing feeling that something was wrong. Something I wasn't prepared to face. I turned the key in the lock and stepped inside. The house was eerily quiet at first, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. But then, from upstairs, I heard voices. It was him. There was a woman. I froze. At first, I tried to convince myself that it was harmless. Maybe he had invited a colleague or a friend from his book club over. I had no reason to be suspicious. But as I heard their voices, laughter, hushed tones, a playfulness in their words, it felt different, too close. I slowly began to climb the stairs, my footsteps deliberate and heavy. Each step felt like an eternity. Voices grew clearer as I approached our bedroom. My breath caught in my throat as I hesitated at the top of the stairs. My hand instinctively reached for the railing, but I didn't feel the comfort of it. I felt exposed, vulnerable. I felt like an intruder in my own home. The voices continued, now unmistakable. The low, steady hum of his voice, followed by her melodic laughter. There was something so familiar about it, so comfortable, it made my skin crawl. The intimacy of it all hit me like a gut punch. Something wasn't right. Something was deeply wrong. I crept closer to the bedroom door, the crack of light spilling into the hallway from the partially open door. My heart raced, felt nauseous, but I couldn't turn back. I had to know. I had to understand what was happening. I pressed my ear against the door. I could hear them more clearly now, but their words were muffled, just out of reach. I heard her giggling, followed by him responding in a voice I didn't recognize. It was light, teasing, not how he spoke to me, not how he ever spoke to anyone. I held my breath. The door was so close, and yet it felt miles away. My hands were trembling, my body tense with fear and anticipation. My mind screamed at me to turn around and walk away, but my feet refused to move. I was rooted to the spot, unwilling to acknowledge the feeling that something I once held sacred was slipping away. In that moment, I realized just how easily things could change. How the trust I had in my husband, in our relationship, could vanish in an instant. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to walk away, to ignore what was happening just on the other side of that door. The laughter grew louder. He spoke again, and this time I could make out the words, "You always know how to make me laugh." I heard her respond, but the words were barely audible, drowned out by my racing thoughts. My heart was pounding now, and the walls seemed to close in around me. I had to know. I had to see with my own eyes. With shaking hands, I slowly pushed open the door. The creak of the hinges was deafening in the stillness, but neither of them seemed to hear. The sight that greeted me was one I would never forget. There he was, my husband, my partner for over 8 years, sitting on the edge of our bed, shirtless. Next to him was a woman I knew all too well, Clara, my best friend. Her hair was disheveled, and she sat too close to him, her hand resting on his thigh as they shared a private moment. The sight hit me like a physical blow, my legs giving way beneath me. I didn't know whether to scream, cry, or run. My mind was spinning, trying to process the scene in front of me. For a moment, no one moved. They were frozen, caught in the act, unaware that their secret had been exposed. My eyes locked with Clara's, And in that moment, I saw the guilt in her eyes. There was something else too, something darker, something that I couldn't place. Her lips trembled, but she didn't speak. She couldn't. My husband's expression was one of shock, quickly followed by a look of guilt. He scrambled to grab his shirt, but I didn't need to see him clothed to know the truth. I had seen enough. Betrayal was written all over their faces. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. I couldn't form a sentence, couldn't express the chaos that was consuming me. My heart was shattered, my trust obliterated in a single moment. I felt the tears sting my eyes, the sobs threatening to escape, but I couldn't give them the satisfaction. I didn't want them to see me break. Not like this. What? What is this? The words finally tumbled out, weak and trembling. Wait, it's not what it looks like, he stammered, his voice shaking, but his words only made things worse. Clara remained silent, her eyes downcast, unable to meet my gaze. Not what it looks like, I repeated, my voice rising with each word, filled with disbelief. We're sitting here on our bed with her, laughing, touching. What else could it possibly be? He tried to speak, to explain. Words came out in a jumbled mess, something about how it had been going on for a while, how it just happened. But the more he spoke, the more I realized how utterly empty his words were. He was just trying to save face, trying to explain away the irreparable damage he had done. There was no saving this. There was no fixing this. I turned and walked away, not wanting to hear any more. The room felt suffocating, as if the air itself had thickened with the weight of his lies. His voice followed me, calling out for me to stay. He didn't even realize that the moment he had broken my trust, the moment I had seen the truth with my own eyes, was the moment he lost me. I left the room, my hands shaking, my body trembling with emotion. My mind was a whirlwind, but the only thought I could hold on to was the overwhelming pain in my chest. I stumbled down the stairs and out the front door, not caring where I was going, just needing to escape, needing to breathe. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't care. I just drove. For hours I drove, letting the tears flow freely, my thoughts racing with questions I could never answer. How long had it been going on? How long had they been betraying me? My best friend, how could she do this to me? How could he? I don't know how long I drove that night. Hours, maybe more. But the world outside blurred into a haze of streetlights and darkness. My thoughts were a whirlwind of confusion, anger, and heartache. I couldn't make sense of any of it. Betrayal was a raw, gaping wound that refused to heal, and I had no idea how to move forward. Eventually, I found myself at the edge of town, parked near a quiet lake. I stepped out of the car and walked to the water's edge, the cold breeze biting at my skin. I needed space, time, distance from everything, from them. My mind kept replaying the scene, their faces, the laughter, the way he tried to brush it off as if it was nothing, as if I was nothing. Tears came again, hot and fast. I wiped them away angrily, but it did no good. I had no control over them. All I wanted was to feel something other than the emptiness that had consumed me. I thought about how I had trusted him with everything. My heart, my life. How could I have been so blind? How had I not seen the signs? My phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. It was a message from him, my husband. His name flashed on the screen, and for a moment, I considered ignoring it. But I couldn't. I had to hear it from him. I needed to hear the words, even if they would only make things worse. Please, we need to talk. Come home. I stared at the message for a long time. Words were so simple, yet they felt like a slap in the face. Talk? What was there left to say? He had made his choices. He had betrayed me, and no amount of talking would change that. But a small part of me still yearned for an explanation, for something that could make sense of all this madness. I drove back home in a daze. I walked through the door. The house felt cold, sterile, like a place I no longer recognized. Silence was deafening. It was as if the walls themselves had absorbed the tension from earlier, leaving behind a palpable heaviness. I found him sitting on the couch, his head in his hands. He looked broken, but I wasn't sure if it was guilt or frustration that weighed him down. His eyes met mine, but there was no trace of the man I thought I knew. Instead, they were filled with regret, and something else, something darker. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely a whisper. I could hear the tremor in his words, but I couldn't bring myself to feel sympathy. How could I? How could I feel anything but betrayal? He had destroyed everything, and now he was sorry. Too little. too late. Sorry? I echoed, my voice shaking with emotion. Sorry for what? For betraying me? For hurting me? For throwing away everything we built together? I didn't mean for it to happen, he said, his voice cracking. It just did. It was a mistake. A mistake? My mind reeled. A mistake? How could he possibly call it a mistake? A mistake is something you make when you knock over a glass of water or forget an appointment. But this wasn't a mistake. This was intentional. This was deceit. This was betrayal. Clara, I whispered, my voice trembling. The name hung in the air, heavy with accusation. I couldn't even look at him as I said it. How long has this been going on? He hesitated. A long pause that felt like an eternity. He looked away, as if trying to avoid the question. But I wouldn't let him. I needed to hear it. I needed the truth. No matter how painful it was. It's been a few months, he admitted quietly, the words hitting me like a physical blow. It started slowly. We were just friends at first. But then it became more. I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. A few months. My heart sank as I processed his words. They had been lying to me for months. I had been so blind, so trusting, and they had taken advantage of that trust. I had known Clara for years. She was my best friend, my confidant, and she had betrayed me, just as deeply as he had. I turned away, unable to bear the weight of his gaze. The anger, the pain, it all welled up inside me, threatening to consume me. Don't, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. Just don't. I can't do this right now. I know I've hurt you, he said, his voice full of regret. But please, we can fix this. We can work through this. I love you. I always have. His words felt empty now, like a lifeline I had already let slip away. Love? What was love when it was built on lies? What was love when it could be tossed aside so easily? I didn't know who he was anymore, and I wasn't sure I ever wanted to find out. You don't get to say that, I replied, my voice shaking with a mix of fury and sorrow. You lost the right to say that the moment you chose her over me. His face twisted in pain, and for a brief moment, I almost felt sorry for him. But then the anger took over again, the anger at the betrayal, at the years of lies, at the years of trust that had been shattered in a single moment. You've broken me, I whispered, almost to myself, and I don't know if I can ever forgive you. I turned and walked out of the room, not waiting for a response. The truth was, I didn't know if I could ever forgive him. How could I? How could I ever look at him the same way again? How could I ever trust him again? I spent the next few days in a haze, lost in a sea of confusion and heartache. I didn't know what to do, where to go, or how to even begin healing. My world had been turned upside down, and I was struggling to find my footing again. But through the pain, I also realized something. I deserved more. I deserved honesty, loyalty, and respect. I didn't need to settle for someone who didn't value me, who didn't honor the commitment we had made to each other. It was time to make a choice for me, a choice for my happiness. I had to walk away, not just from him, but from the life I had built with him. It wasn't easy. It wasn't fair, but it was the only way I could move forward. And so I packed my things, took a deep breath, and left. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay there. Not with him, not with her, not anymore. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was taking control of my life again. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I could face it on my own. I was stronger than I had ever realized, and I would rebuild my life, piece by piece, until I was whole again.